President Trump just walked onto the deck of the most expensive warship ever built in human history. A $13 billion aircraft carrier that China has spent over $1 trillion trying to sink and still hasn't cracked the code. And he picked the exact moment two other American carriers are racing a 60-day deadline in the Persian Gulf, with less than 2 weeks left before that blockade either holds or the whole region goes up in flames. This wasn't a photo op for the cameras. This was the Navy showing its hand. The one ship it sends in if that deadline breaks, and the one ship Beijing has spent 20 years still can't figure out how to kill. Here's exactly how. Right now, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS George H.W. Bush are holding position near the Strait of Hormuz, enforcing a blockade against Iran. That strait is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and roughly 20% of the entire world's oil supply, close to 17 million barrels a day, moves through it. Shut it down, and you're not disrupting a region. You're disrupting the global economy. The blockade runs on a 60-day mutual observation memorandum signed by both countries on June 17th. As of this week, less than 2 weeks remain on that timetable. It holds, or it breaks. And the Navy is already moving pieces to prepare for either outcome. The USS Theodore Roosevelt just wrapped the at-sea phase of PIMPAC 2026. 30 nations, 30,000 personnel, 30 surface ships, 5 submarines, nearly 200 aircraft, running 2,400 sorties across 5,000 scenario-based problem sets in the Pacific. Roosevelt returned to Pearl Harbor on July 28th, and it's now heading towards San Diego to prep for deployment, likely as the relief carrier for Lincoln, depending on how the Iran negotiations play out. Both strike groups holding the blockade line are running escort with Arleigh Burke-class destroyers armed with SM-6 interceptors, each missile priced around $4.3 million, specifically to counter Iran's fast-attack boat swarms and coastal anti-ship batteries. This is a live enforcement operation with a hard expiration date, and a third carrier is already staged to backfill it. But here's the question nobody is asking. If the deadline breaks before Roosevelt is in position, what does the Navy send in on short notice? The answer is standing on the flight deck right now, shaking hands for the cameras. Why Ford specifically, and not one of the 10 Nimitz-class carriers already in the fleet? Because Ford isn't a bigger version of the same ship. It's a different machine entirely, built around numbers no other carrier on the planet can match. That includes China's. Start with the reactors. Ford runs on 2 A-1B nuclear plants, each rated near 700 megawatts thermal, a combined output of roughly 1,400 megawatts. Compare that to the Nimitz-class A-4W reactors, around 550 megawatts thermal each. That's almost a 30% jump in raw power, and Ford needs every bit of it because that surplus energy runs systems no steam-powered carrier ever had to support. The big one is the electromagnetic aircraft launch system. It replaces steam catapults with magnetic linear motors, boosting sortie generation by roughly 25%, while cutting peak launch stress on airframes by an estimated 30%. Pair it with the advanced arresting gear recovery system, and Ford is targeting a surge rate of up to 270 sorties per day, against a sustained rate near 160. Then there's the part almost nobody talks about, the elevators. Ford runs 11 electrically powered advanced weapons elevators, replacing the hydraulic elevators every prior carrier used since the Cold War. They move bombs and missiles to the flight deck twice as fast, with far fewer parts to break down mid-deployment. Above deck, Ford's dual-band radar fuses S-band and X-band tracking into one system. Simultaneous long-range search and high-resolution missile tracking that older Nimitz-class radars can't run at once. There's also the flight deck layout itself. Ford's 3-wire arresting configuration and redesigned island, moved further aft and slimmed down, free up nearly 1,000 additional square feet of usable deck space compared to a Nimitz-class ship. That space alone lets Ford run a faster aircraft recovery cycle during high-tempo operations, refueling and rearming jets in parallel instead of one lane at a time. Add in the Ford class's new dual-band Spy 3 and Spy 4 radar suite, handling both horizon search and self-defense simultaneously, and you've got a ship built to fight and refuel at the same time. something no Nimitz-class hull was ever wired to do. None of this came cheap. The lead ship alone ran $13.3 billion, with the total program pushing past $2 billion over budget. But the Navy's bet is that Ford earns it back. Automation cuts the crew requirement by roughly 600 sailors compared to a Nimitz-class ship, trimming an estimated $4 billion in lifetime operating costs per hull. Now put China's best carrier next to it. The Fujian, commissioned in 2025, displaces between 80 and 85,000 tons full load. Ford displaces 100,000. Fujian runs electromagnetic catapults too, but on conventional oil-fired propulsion, not nuclear, capping its range against refueling logistics in a way Ford never faces. Fujian's air wing sits at 50 to 60 aircraft, J-15T fighters, J-15D electronic warfare jets, the newer J-35 stealth fighter. Ford carries 75 to 90, FA-18 Super Hornets, E-2D Hawkeyes, EA-18G Growlers, and the MQ-25 Stingray refueling drone, extending strike range hundreds of miles beyond the carrier itself. China's older carriers, Liaoning and Shandong, trail even further, both under 66,000 tons, both using ski jump ramps instead of catapults, capping how much fuel and munitions their jets can carry off the deck. Run the math on deployment endurance. A Nimitz-class carrier typically deploys 9 to 10 months before heading home for maintenance. Ford just finished a deployment lasting 326 days, the longest since Vietnam. And it wasn't patrolling calm water. It ran strike operations through the Iran conflict, then rolled straight into the mission that captured Nicolas Maduro. 2 theaters back-to-back, 0 downtime, 1 hull. That same flight deck is being wired into the networked strike architecture behind the F-47, America's next-generation stealth fighter, fast-tracked for exactly this scenario. The F-47's onboard AI processes millions of data points per second, turning the pilot from a threat dodger into a fleet commander directing drone wingmen in real time. Pair that with a carrier built to outlast every rival on deployment length and outbuild every rival on tonnage and reactor output, and you get a strike package engineered to outrun the enemy's stockpile. Not just its missiles. But here's where the real leverage shows up. This summer, the Navy tested something that flips carrier doctrine on its head, turning Ford into a floating power plant. Those same 2 A-1B reactors that launch fighter jets can export power directly onto the grid at Naval Station Norfolk. Enough surplus electricity to run a coastal military installation independent of civilian power entirely. That single test breaks 2 decades of Chinese military math. China's entire anti-carrier doctrine is built on one number: sink or disable a $13 billion target, and you've erased America's Pacific air power in 1 strike. That's what the DF-21D and DF-17 were designed to do. Carrier killer missiles, priced at $2 to $5 million apiece, with ranges near 1,500 kilometers for the DF-21D and up to 2,500 for the newer DF-17 hypersonic variant. Launch 24 in a saturation strike, and China spends $50 to $120 million, threatening an asset worth over 100 times that. China's newest entry raises the stakes further. The DF-26, nicknamed the Guam Killer, is rated near 4,000 kilometers range, built specifically to threaten American carriers and bases far outside China's coastline. Right now, China operates just 3 active carriers: Liaoning, Shandong, Fujian, but its own military planning documents reportedly target a fleet of 9 by 2035. America fields 11 today. China is racing to close a gap it hasn't closed yet, while solving a targeting problem that just got harder. The moment Ford becomes a power-generating strategic asset feeding infrastructure on land, the whole doctrine collapses. You're no longer weighing sink a carrier against remove a strike crew. You're weighing it against knocking out power to an American naval base, an escalation Beijing never priced in. And with Fujian's air wing already outgunned by 20 to 40 aircraft, and its propulsion capped by conventional fuel, China has no like-for-like answer waiting in reserve. That's not a tactical gap. That's a doctrine nobody in Beijing has finished rewriting yet. $13 billion, 1,400 megawatts, 11 electric weapons elevators, a 326-day deployment, 24 missiles that can't solve the new equation. Drop it in the comments. Does the 60-day Iran deadline hold, or does Theodore Roosevelt end up relieving Lincoln in the Gulf before Ford ever gets the call? Subscribe and see you in our next videos.